Hello, boys and girls. Today we're going to talk about 3 strategies for multiplication. 2 of them that you did last year, and one of them that most of you know, or a lot of you know, but not everybody. And so that is going to be the standard US algorithm. And I say it's the United States algorithm because other countries have other standard algorithms, but this is what we use in the United States. And this is how your parents and I learned how to do multiplication. But we're going to start off with reviewing the other 2 methods to see how they are tied to our standard algorithm. Okay, so in order to do this, we're going to start with the number 4,672, and we're going to multiply it by 8. And as always, I'd like you to estimate what the answer would be first. And remember, the estimate is something we can do quickly in our heads to get us in the ballpark of an answer. And so if I look at 4,672, I know that that's closer to 5,000. So I'm gonna round that up to 5,000 times 8. And I look for the fact. In 5,000 times 8, the fact is 5 times 8, and that equals 40. And then I add the other place values on the end. And so I know that the estimate for our multiplication problem is 40,000. And what you should also be thinking about is that an overestimate or an underestimate? So think about that for a second. Is 40,000 going to be an overestimate for this or an underestimate? And I'm hoping that what you came up with was that it's going to be an overestimate because we rounded this up by several hundred and we kept this the same. And so 40,000 is going to be an overestimate, which means our answer should be less than that. Okay, let's take a look at the first way, is the area model. And that's where we break up a rectangle into the place values for each of those numbers, or each of those place values in that large number. So we have 4,672, and each one of those place values is going to be multiplied by 8. So the first thing we're going to do is 8 times 4,000. We look for the fact. 8 times 4 is 32. But then we have to move up 3 place values, and since 32 is a whole number, we move up place values by sticking those zeros in the back of the number. So 4,000 times 8 equals 32,000. And then we move on. 8 times 600. Well, we know that 8 times 6 is 48. So we've used the 8 and the 6. We need 2 extra place values. So we stick those zeros on the end. And then we move on. 8 times 70. We know that 8 times 7 is 56. And then there's another place value that we have to add. And finally, we look at 8 times 2, and we say it's 16. And so we take all of those numbers and we add them up. And so if we line them up by their place values, we can add them up. Maybe some of you could actually do that in your head, but this is what it's going to look like. 0 plus 0 plus 0 is plus 6 is 6, and then 0 plus 0 plus 6 plus 1 is 7. 8 plus 5 is 13, put down the 3, carry the 1. 4 plus 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7, and then we have 3. So our actual answer ended up being 37,376, and we compare that to our estimate of 40,000, and it's definitely in the ballpark, and we know that this was an overestimate, so our answer makes sense. So that was the first way, to use the area model and then add up all of those partial products. Now, speaking of partial products, that's another way that we learned. And this is the way a lot of you did it last year, is you just looked at the first thing you were going to multiply is 8 times 2. You wrote it over here, 8 times 2, and you said that that was 16. And then you looked at 8 times 70. You wrote it over here. 8 times 70 is 560. Then you looked at the next place value, 8 times 600. 8 times 600 is 4,800. And you'll notice what's happening here is the same thing that's happening here. We're looking at each of the partial products. And then finally, 8 times 4,000 is 32,000. And again, we line them up so that we can add them up, and we end up with the same result of 37,376. So both of those ways breaks down each of the place values, and you multiply every place value by every place value. And this keeps track of it. Now this looks more like the standard algorithm than this does, but you'll notice that both of them have the same answer. So now let's do the standard algorithm, see how that's done, and compare it to these two models. Okay, so with the standard algorithm, we start the same way. We're going to say 8 times 2. 8 times 2 is 16. But now we're going to write the 6 down and carry the 10 into the tens place. Now we're going to treat this as 8 times 7. We know in our head it's 8 times 70, but we're going to say 8 times 7 is 56 plus 1. So now we're going to add, we're going to multiply and then add what we carried. So 8 times 7 is 56 plus 1 more is 57. We're going to write the 7 down, and we're going to carry that 5. Now we're into the hundreds place. We're going to go back and say 8 times 6 is 48, plus 5 more is 53. So we're going to write that 3 down and carry the 5. And finally, 8 times 4. Again, we know in our head it's 8 times 4,000, but our place value is being kept by how we're writing the numbers down here. 8 times 4 is 32, plus 5 more is 37. We go back in and put in our commas, and you'll notice that we get the same numbers. So this is like the shorthand version. We're still multiplying with place values, but we're not considering the place values, writing those extra zeros because of where we're writing our numbers down here. So while this one, we look at all the partial products, here we just have the product, and that's why it's the shorthand version. When we add extra digits, there'll be other steps that we're going to take, and we have to cross these out so that we don't try to add them again, but this is what it's going to look like. So let's try one on our own without looking at where each of these sections are coming from. All right, so let's try 469 times 6. Okay, very first thing we're going to do, as always, is we're going to say, okay, let's estimate it. I like to put the estimation in a bubble. 469 is pretty close to 500. I'm going to round that up to 500, and I'm going to multiply that times 6. I can look for the fact. 5 times 6 is 30. Add my extra place values, And so I know that my answer is going to be about 3,000. If you notice, I said I rounded this up. And so this I know is going to be an overestimate. This is going to be close to my real answer, but it should be greater than my real answer. Okay, let's take a look. Give me another color. Let's take a look at how we're going to do this. 6 times 9 is the first thing that we're going to multiply. And 6 times 9 is 54. I'm going to write the 4 down and carry the tens place. And I'll put that in a different color. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, it's not really clear, I'm just going to write it in red. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is say 6 times 6. Of course, I know it's 6 times 60, but I don't have to consider that because I'm taking my numbers up, and that's how the place values are being multiplied. So 6 times 6 is 36 plus 5 more. So remember, we're adding in everything that we carry. 6 times 6 is 36 plus 5 more is 41. I'm going to write the 1 down and carry that 4 to the next place value. Now I say to myself, 6 times 4 is 24 plus 4 more is 28. I count over 3 and put in my comma. And so my answer for this problem is 2,814. And then I compare it back to my estimate, which is 3,000. I know that 3,000 is an overestimate, and so this answer is reasonable. We're going to go through it one more time. We're going to do one more together, and then I'm going to have you try all of these strategies and then focus on our standard algorithm. Okay, let's take that down. And straighten my paper out. A little bit of technical difficulty here. I'm going to borrow tape off of this one. Oh, thank you to my assistant. And let's do one that has a 0 in it and see what happens. Okay, so here's our number. Let's do 708 times 7. Okay, first thing we do, everybody, every time, we estimate. So we try to get in the ballpark as simply as we can. I'm going to make this 700. I'm going to multiply that times 7. I know 7 times 7 is 49. I add on our place values, and I know our answer is going to be somewhere in the ballpark of 4,900, because this is just a little bit less, or this is a little bit more than this. We've chosen to round down on this. I know that this is going to be a little bit of an underestimate. Not a huge one, but a little one. So I have to keep that in mind. My real answer needs to be a little bit more than this, or I've made a mistake somewhere. So let's take a look. 7 times 8 is 56. I'm going to put down the 6. Remember, you always put down the ones place. And I'm going to carry the 5. Okay, 7 times 0 is 0. But I still have to add my 5. So 7 times 0 is 0, plus 5 is 5. I have nothing to carry. I have no tens place, so I don't have to worry about carrying anything. And then finally, 7 times 7 is 49. since there's nothing else that I need to carry over here, I get to write down 49 because there's no other number that I have to carry, so I get to write it down. And so my answer ends up being 4,956. And if you recall, I said that this is just a little bit under this. So this is going to be a little bit of an underestimate, and in fact it is. This was only 56 greater than this, so my answer is reasonable. I think I am going to try one more, and then we'll call it a night, or we'll call it an afternoon, and then you guys can try it on your own. All right, let's try 664 times 8. Okay, lots of things I can do with this for an estimate. I can make this 700 times 8. That would be a good estimate, and I know it would be an overestimate. If I said 700 times 8, I know 8 times 7 is 56, and I add my place values, so I know that's going to be an overestimate. I might actually want to keep this at 664, and I'm going to multiply it by 10. And then I know it's going to be 6,640. Both of those are overestimates, so this is more of an overestimate than this, but certainly acceptable. Remember, I want these estimates to be so easy that you won't mind doing them. Okay, now let's start to multiply. First we say 8 times 4 is 32. We put down the 2 because it's in the ones place, and we carry the 3 from the 32. Next, we do 8 times 6. And 8 times 6 is 48, but we have to add our 3, so that's 51. I'm going to put down the 1 and carry the 5, because I always put down the ones place and carry the tens place. The next thing I'm going to say to myself is 8 times 6 is 48 again, but now I have to add 5. So 48 plus 5 is 53. So I write down 53. Now why did I get to write down that 53? Because I had nowhere else to carry it. So I write down the 53. And there's my answer, 5,313. It's closer to this amount, but I already knew that this was going to be an overestimate. It's a little bit further away, but either one of those are acceptable, and that makes sense. That 5,312 is close enough to both of these that my answer makes sense. Okay, so what we're going to do is today's worksheet is going to have both the area model, the partial products, and then you're going to try the standard algorithm. Remember that if we're multiplying, we always want to first get a quick and easy estimate, and then decide in our head if that estimate is going to be an overestimate or an underestimate in order to see if our answer makes sense. All right, have a great day, boys and girls.